Let's give it up for our next storyteller, Lily.
So it all started when my friend Richard said, "You should really try it." And I thought that I would live all of my days having never tried it. But he showed me all of these pictures of these beautiful women that he had been meeting, and I had been single long enough. And there was this new app called Bumble, which was like Tinder in that it required no money and almost no effort, but it was unlike Tinder in that people weren't looking for just hookups. And so I put a couple pictures up and I put a couple sentences up and I started online dating. And I was shocked with the sea of faces and profiles that came next. And it felt like this instant pass or fail test. Like, oh, he's cute, pass. Or he smokes cigarettes, fail. Or picture with a dog, pass, which is like every guy in Denver. Or looks kind of like a bro, fail. And if you pass that part, and then it was interesting to me because behind the scenes, they were evaluating me as well. And every time I didn't get that click of that mutual connection, I had failed. And I had no idea why. And I would never get feedback about that. And it was really disconcerting. But it was also really entertaining because I ended up meeting all of these interesting people that I never would have met otherwise. But it was also kind of a scheduling nightmare because, you know, when you're meeting up with people and you have all these drink dates, and so I ended up having 2 in one night. And the second one was a private pilot for a CEO, which is fascinating, but also whenever the CEO wants to go somewhere, he just has to go with him. So he has this awesome per diem, but no control over his life. And we had this interesting conversation and my phone died. And like a gentleman, he put me into an Uber. And then I said, "Oh no, I got the wrong Uber because this one is for Steve." And he just looked at me silently and said, "I'm Steve." And shut the door and never talked to me again. And it got to be a lot. And so I took a break. And I live in Boulder and I work in Denver. And so I was going to a show by myself at the Ogden and was kind of strolling around Colfax waiting for the show to start and stopped in this brewery and noticed this cute guy when I walked in. And he came up to talk to me and I thought, cute, okay, maybe pass. And then found out that he was an engineer. Fail, question mark? I dated 2 engineers in a row and had out loud told my friend I'm never dating engineers again. And he also worked, he's a substation engineer, so worked in the oil and gas industry. And I'm an environmentalist and would never date someone who works in the oil and gas industry. But the thing about being in person right away is that he had this magnetism about him. And so I gave him my number, pass. And he called me a few days later, and after all of these Bumble dates, I thought we would have this awesome dinner date. And he said, "I'm going to come up to Boulder and meet you for coffee at 1 p.m. And I thought, what a fail of a first date, until I realized that it was his intention, if things went well, to spend the day with me. And 8 hours later, he dropped me off at my house. Pass. And while we were still testing each other out, this big thing happened that can really transform the course of the start of a relationship, either progressing really forward quickly or sort of ending very abruptly. And on a Friday, my company laid off 16, I think, or so of my team members, a huge percentage of my team. And while I was reeling with trying to figure out how to handle their clients and their projects, my grandmother died 2 days later. And she's an entirely different story. She was almost 98 years old. We were so incredibly close. And just suffice it to say that I was absolutely heartbroken. And so in the midst of booking a last-minute next-day flight to Montreal and figuring out what to do about work, I texted him to cancel our 3rd date. And he said, "Is there anything I can do? I'm so sorry." And I said, "I know we just met, but you could come hold me." And so 45 minutes later, he arrived with 2 Chipotle burritos in case I was hungry. And the next morning, he drove me to my work, which was right next to Union Station, right next to the light rail. But then he also drove me all the way to the airport. And the next few days were just this blur of grief and sitting Shiva a little bit the way my grandmother had requested, but also guiltily checking my email and trying to handle everything that was going on at work at the same time. And I planned this really insane trip back where I would wake up at 3 a.m. Mountain Time, 5 a.m. Eastern, and take the direct flight all the way back to Montreal, or to Denver, to to get back at 11 a.m. and then work, take the light rail back to work and work the next half of the day. And I just remember, the tram from the gates takes you to this certain spot in the terminal, and then there's this escalator up to kind of the main part of the terminal. And I'm ascending that escalator and just completely raw and just trying to figure out how I'm going to handle the rest of that day and sort of the weeks and everything piling up moving forward. And at the top of the escalator, there he is. Standing there with these flowers peeking out the back of his backpack like a peacock with plumage. And he hands me those flowers, and he hands me hot tea and cut up apples and cut up bell peppers. And even though my work is still right next to the light rail, he drives me all the way back to work. And now I never arrive at the airport without a peacock waiting for me unless he's traveling with me. And I never sit in the audience hoping I get to tell my story without a sweet engineer by my side, where he is sitting beside my empty seat right now. And I deleted the app because I found someone who passed. Thank you.